but I don't just sit on the tools and keep them to myself. I've learned the right tools and the wrong tools. And I think it's a mindset kind of thing. Sure, we could be Ferengi and be hyper focused on acquisition, but acquisitions for its own sake is pointless. Okay, yeah, you piled up a bunch of stuff there. So like what's the point? It's got to be doing something. And that's the thing. It's like if you have a bunch of money, that money ought to be doing something. And if it's doing something, it should be doing something that does something good. You look at all these people that have these big expensive houses and a bunch of cars and hookers and blow and whatnot. Maybe religious leaders like the Pope or something, right? People care about what the Pope says. Why? He's just a dude.
It's a guy who's selected by people voting democratically. However, he's chosen by God directly at the same time.
It's not one or the other. It's just a matter of what you put your resources into. And sometimes doing good in the world is building a better mousetrap. I don't know, selling a roll of toilet paper that Eric doesn't have to 3D print a spacer because it's so narrow.
Of all the positions in a company, the one that should always be hired from within is the CEO.
Yeah.
But it pretty much never is.
Never. That is so rare.
Yeah.
Like almost impossible for that to happen.
Like, why? Why?
It makes no sense. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Okay, well, what about like a hiring for a CEO position from one of the executives that work under the CEO? No, they didn't do that at my company. No, they canned the CEO and then just hired a CEO from a totally different company. Fortunately, she turned out to be okay, but like I said, it could have gone the other way entirely.
Yeah, it's easy to say, like, all we have to do is this, when, like, you don't have to work 40 hours a day busting your ass because you have millions of dollars. There's definitely a disconnect between reality and, gee, it's so easy to get where I am. Why aren't you doing it too?
Enable program DZ timing.
Welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy with me, Casey Rochford. You are the subscriber, I hope. If not, do that now and leave a comment because you'll probably have lots to say because, well, everyone should. These are things people should have opinions about.
And they should be sharing them. And I'm Eric Rosenblatt. Casey and I, we write our own music and we put part of one of our songs at the end of every episode. Usually, and it may be new, it may be old, it may be something you've never heard before or something you've heard all too often. But
you could be the first person to actually sit and watch all the way through to the end of it.
Yeah, hey, that should be a challenge. Yeah.
TikTok challenge all the way through a kitchen sink microscopy.
Yeah. So yeah, Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, you have a phrase that you use from time to time of, should we care what the people in the Ivory Tower think? And I got to thinking, like, what constitutes the Ivory Tower? Like, what does that encompass exactly? Like, is it wealth? Is it power? Is it knowledge or lack of knowledge?
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of different definitions.
There definitely are. I mean, I guess my interpretation, my particular definition does sort of, I mean, one aspect certainly is wealth or fame or something like that. But really, symbolically, the Ivory Tower to me represents somebody who is well separated from the minions, the low people, the average everyday person. That they're living way high up on a mountain somewhere and they don't interact with the everyday people.
So in woke speak, white privilege.
I mean, I guess, yeah, you could say that to some extent. Basically, like, high-level politicians, really famous movie stars or whatever, people with a ton of money, that kind of thing. that
Yeah.
they only interact with people of their like, essentially, and don't have any contact or even experience with
Yeah.
the everyday world that all of us pee on.
Right. Especially with consequences. Like when it like if it is truly like a situation privilege or something, like they tend to get away with things that other people wouldn't. Politicians,
Hunter Biden, like
a literal felon president,
Yeah.
like we're in strange times. Yeah. So I I definitely think there's not a lot of cause to pay much attention to what these people think within context, I
Yeah.
suppose. Like it's not to say that these people can't contribute something in a positive way to some field of knowledge or whatever.
Or some endeavor, like getting a thing done. Say, going to the moon. Kennedy, right? Kennedy was kind of the driving force behind that whole entire thing. If he didn't give that really awesome speech, I don't think it would have motivated people to do what they did. And also funneling a lot of money into that project. Like, yeah, so you could certainly accomplish a lot if you have that kind of position, but oftentimes not a lot gets accomplished by these people. And yeah, like you said, they can get away with murder, basically, and get away with anything. There are presidents who should be tried for war crimes and or vice presidents. And yeah, that never happens. No, they can get away just like Nixon said, oh, if the president does it, it's not illegal.
Yeah, it's like who's there to do it? I think we talked about that recently in Lightning Strikes Twice, maybe. Like, if concentration camps started popping up in the US, who stops that? Because the checks and balances don't work.
Yeah.
And there's nobody really above that has any like recognized authority anyway.
Well, and
isn't that a thing too? Recognizing authority, like
yeah,
is that
where does that even come from?
I don't recognize your authority, and then you can't arrest me. Is that all that takes?
Yeah, exactly.
If so, got a lot of things to do.
True, exactly. Well, and then one has to ask the question: where does that authority come from? Why does a particular person possess that particular authority and not another person? Why do you have that authority and I do not? That kind of thing.
How does one ascend to the Ivory Tower then?
Well, the question would be too, like, does one even want to? I would not want to walk in those circles.
The reason I ask is from kind of like a Robin Hood standpoint, and that would be to like begin ascending the stairs in the Ivory Tower and then start smothering them with butter. Other people slipping and falling down,
infiltrate the system and then put some wrenches into the works, which would be an effective tactic, honestly, sabotaging the system from within, especially if you had kind of a group of people who they were all intent on doing that. The problem, of course, is it's very easy to get corrupted by that, like the money and the presumed sense of power and whatnot. It makes people drunk, and then they can become part of the system because of that. It's designed to do that too, by the way.
I think I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I think if you actually rise to wealth, like from a place of near poverty or poverty, you never forget what it was like. Like, I don't think anything can really erase that.
No. And all the big, from the Industrial Revolution, all those people that rose to wealth, they ended up being the biggest philanthropists, like starting these organizations that gave out money for education and whatnot. I mean, the Nobel Prize, Carnegie.
But as soon as that wealth passed the next generation and they were just born in this lap of the silver spoon or whatever, like that's where I think all of this rot began to grow.
Yeah. And actually that's a normal human trait. And you can see it in all the people who win like the lottery, right? They don't have any money. They're working a minimum wage job and boom, now they're a billionaire, right? Well, they don't know how to handle having that kind of money, and they fritter it away in the course of a year, basically. And now they're poor again. Whereas if you work your way up, you kind of learn to manage that, and your wealth builds over time. And it's not like oh my God, I'm a billionaire. No, it's like, well, I lived in my car for years and I slowly worked my way up. And yeah, I think you don't forget that. Because I know some one percenters, and all of them were people who worked their way to that, and they really didn't start with a whole hell of a lot. And yeah, they're good people. Like my uncle is one. Well, he passed away recently, but it was crazy going to his funeral because there were all kinds of people, so many people there in the church that he built. So he built this community center, basically. So many people stood up and told stories about how my uncle helped them. Like they had nothing and he helped them out. And now their life is totally different because he like got in there and like guided them to a better life, essentially.
So you come from good stock, but you didn't have any kids that you know of. So
I know exactly.
Should have been passing that along.
I know, yeah, no, true. Well, I can pass stories along, I guess. That's what we do on the show.
Yeah.
But it was amazing how many people my uncle helped, and no questions asked. He would welcome them into his house, into the church, or whatever, help them financially, but my uncle's like always a hard worker. He had a farm that I worked on too many times, and he expected you to work, right? Like you had to bust your balls to work on the farm and stuff. And it was hard work, but it was rewarding. And that I think that's something lacking in a lot of the people in the Ivory Tower these days.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good example that he was setting. Like if there were more people like that in this day and age with the massive expansive reach of social media, I think it would be very helpful if they were going viral with that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And showing others like, look, I'm doing all this. I'm still rich. I'm still content and completely safe from ever losing enough, like I'll never be one of these people like living on the street, but I'm helping people and that's a great feeling you can't buy.
You can't. No amount of money can give you that.
All these rich people either don't know that there's this great feeling they're missing out on that money doesn't buy, but having money can make it easier to come by, at least.
Well, and certainly like
that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and the people who have a lot of wealth, like you are in a position to affect actual change. You have the connections, you have the resources to actually do something. And no, you have what Obama has, like 3 properties, I think, that are millions of dollars and stuff. Like, why did you buy that?
Right.
You could have left behind a legacy of actually doing something amazing. Like, actually, kind of contrast that with G.W. Bush. He might have actually saved millions of lives in Africa because he took that place on as like his personal endeavor, right? That he was going to affect change, and he goes there and meets people and tries to make a difference. And yeah, like you can look it up, but he might have saved millions of lives in Africa because just one guy. And people think he's kind of a bumblefuck, right? And maybe it kind of is, which is weird because it's like when he was president, he sounded totally like an idiot. But after he was president, I saw some interviews with him, and he's like, "Oh wow, this guy's really thoughtful. Like he's talking deep now. Like what the hell? Who are you sure?"
I mean, it could be that whole experience might have changed him.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
That's totally possible.
Yeah, and that's where people should be using all of the stuff that they've acquired to do good. Because I mean, you can't take it with you, right? You really want to die atop your heap of gold coins. And I think that's what separates. That's where the Ivory Tower concept comes in, is that there's these people who intentionally sequester themselves into this societal bubble of only the well-off people and only the, I don't know, high society, essentially. and don't interact with the everyday person. They don't walk the streets, and they don't go into stores and buy things and talk to people, the homeless people and stuff. I mean, that's something that I do. I engage with homeless people all the time and talk to them. And I don't have a whole lot of money, but I still sponsor a couple of kids out there.
Do you remember when we ran that paper route? There was that 7-Eleven by the Tacoma Mall, and one night we went in there. I think you were with me. And there was this guy with he looked a little bit like Jeff Foxworthy, but he was wearing like a gray suit with elbow pads, and he was like just talking to the cashier. And then we came in and he was talking to us. And he's like, "You guys should be investing money." And we're all like, yeah, okay, yeah, we don't have any money to invest, but that's great advice, thank you. And he just seemed like one of those guys that was kind of out of touch. Like he probably got lucky with some investment, got a fair amount of money, and decided to buy like an 80s suit and go preach the word of investing money as if it's as easy as that to become a millionaire or something.
Yeah.
It's like, that to me is that kind of like ivory tower mentality.
And we see it big and small, even locally. There's people that they're like, oh, I don't want to associate with the plebes of society and stuff. It's they have their security and stuff, and they have special rules for them, but not, of course, different set of rules for us. And I think that's one thing that kind of defines the ivory tower concept, is that you live in a different kingdom, a different world, maybe a different plane or something like that, where the rules and basically the laws of physics are different in your universe than they are in ours.
And that is a situation where the definition of privilege actually does fit, because it is effectively a club that you enter into because of having a bunch of money or getting really popular. Anything that makes it so that you can make other people rich, or you are rich.
Yes.
Or
And that's
both.
where and going back to kind of the beginning of this, like, should we pay attention to or even care about those in the ivory tower? Well, they're people, so sure. But like, we shouldn't really care about what they say, but maybe consider what they do, because the fact is, it doesn't matter. Like, as an anarchist, I don't understand this, but they still nevertheless have influence. And so, Obama can go and say some stuff and everybody listens to what he says, or Trump or whoever. And so, like, that is something to consider, that they can motivate people to do things, be it for good or for bad. And so that has to be taken into consideration. But I wish more, I guess maybe the idea is, I wish more people would be indifferent to those in the ivory tower, because that's their only power they have, is that influence. The fact that people actually listen and take to heart whatever it is they're saying. Maybe religious leaders like the Pope or something, right? People care about what the Pope says. Why? He's just a dude. He's just a guy, and there's some stupid protocol and procedure that selects the Pope, and now he rides around in the Pope mobile and wears funny hats and stuff. And why does what he says matter? I don't know. Really, technically, it doesn't. It's just a person saying some stuff.
It's a guy who's like selected by people voting democratically. However, he's chosen by God directly at the same time. And God can't seem to agree with himself at first. And then when he does, a different colored smoke comes out of the window. And it's like, oh my God, what the Catholics?
I know. I mean, but this is present, this kind of goofiness is present all over the place. And not just in religion, but in politics too. Like, people, it's like, it doesn't matter, man. It really doesn't matter. Live your life, meet your neighbors, help the helpless, make a difference. You can do that. Everybody can do that. And if we all did that, then none of these fuckheads would be needed.
Yeah.
You know, and if you have a whole bunch of stuff, resources or money or influence or something like that, use it to do good, make a difference, like, you know, something, whatever it might be, further scientific knowledge or medical innovation, or I don't know, help people that are living in places where housing or water is in a shortage or something like that. I don't know, whatever, disease, that kind of thing. I mean, there's no reason that we couldn't have solved all the problems that plague us by now with the resources we have. But yet, no, gotta buy another fucking $12 million house or another big ass yacht or another Bugatti or something like that.
So there's a flip side to this that we should talk about too. And that's, I think some people will discount what people in these ivory towers have to say just because of where they are, their status in society. And the thought just occurred to me, like, while you were talking just now, like, for some reason I was like, man, I wish we had LeVar Burton on the show to talk about this. And it's like, well, most people would want to talk to LeVar Burton about Star Trek or Reading Rainbow or Roots or something. But it's like, all those questions have been asked. Like, I have absolutely no burning desire to ask LeVar Burton about Star Trek. I would actually like to know what he thinks about things in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, why did people get pigeonholed into these things? And then when they speak out about something, it's like, just stick to your music or stick to your sport or whatever. And it's like, hang on, listen.
Well, like I said before, the people in the ivory tower are people. They're actual people. Now, maybe their experiences are sometimes more isolated. Maybe they're not in touch with the reality of things. And so their opinions could be influenced by that to some extent. But still, it should be considered. Sure, okay, everybody should be allowed to speak their mind and express their opinions about things. That's fine. Yeah, and I wouldn't say like LeVar Burton says whatever about something. Who knows? LeVar Burton says, oh, vaccines give you autism or something. Well, I mean, okay, you could say that. You're perfectly entitled to say that, but you're wrong. And I'd be wanting to have a conversation. But that's the thing. It's like somebody like LeVar Burton saying that, again, lots of people look up to those people for whatever reason. And so they may be more likely to take that and internalize it. And so that's the challenge there. But again, yeah, like you'd said, some people will be like, well, just because like a football player said this thing, you don't know their experience. Maybe their experience is much more broad than just football. Like when you look at that person, that's all you know. You didn't know them when they were growing up and all the stuff. You don't know what classes they took or experiences they had, you know.
Football, like more often than not, I think people who play football actually did grow up poor and just got to where they are with a nice fat scholarship and being able to play football well, and then now they're millionaires and they're famous and stuff.
Yeah.
And people don't want to hear about their experiences. It's like, I would rather hear what a football player has to say about politics than a politician does.
Well, yeah, because they're probably much more in touch with
the actual
ground
effect
level
of the politics.
Well, yeah, and sports is actually a pretty solid meritocracy, which is good, whereas politics is not. You could be a complete dunce and still rise to the level of president. Like, as we've seen many times.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't have to be a wizard to do that. But that, yeah, well, and that's the thing, like talking about if we had LeVar Burton on the show, I just want to hear his story. I love stories. Like people's life stories, especially if there's some really interesting events or experiences somebody had. I want to hear about it. And I would imagine LeVar Burton has a lot of really cool stories to tell, but nobody ever asks about him because they're all about Star Trek and all the TV stuff that he's done.
Like if we ever get to a point where we're having famous people on often, it should just be like, you know, we're inviting you on the show and they'll be like, what are we talking about? And you're like, we'll figure it out right before we hit record.
Yep.
You know, well, this is how we do the show. You know?
We did that somewhat recently.
I mean, yeah, we talked to Walter Flakus from Stabbing Westward about goth culture,
Yeah,
and I mean, we did go into some band stuff, of course, as well, but that was like the last half of the show.
I know.
Yeah.
And but it was actually related to that because
Mhm.
of the music style. Like, of
Yeah.
course it's going to go into that. And both of us writing music that might kind of be similar ish.
Right.
Of course, the conversation is naturally
Especially
gonna,
my cover song of Stabbing Westward.
yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
simple.
exactly. So, but like, yeah, I'd probably, if I were to talk to somebody like LeVar Burton, I would be more interested in the production side of things because I love filmmaking. And so
He does
somebody,
directing and stuff.
yeah, somebody who has like a behind the scenes level of knowledge, I really want to know all that, like how all that worked and stuff like that.
I bet he'd be excited to talk about that because
Yeah.
nobody probably interviews him like, what was it like directing? Like
Mhm.
nobody's doing that.
Mhm.
I don't remember ever seeing interview after interview with Steven Spielberg, like maybe one.
Yeah. Or
You know,
Lucas or something. I'd love to talk to
Right.
George Lucas about the first 3 Star Warses and how all that came together. I mean, I've seen documentaries and stuff, but to hear it from the actual person who did it would be kind of cool. Because it's like, I don't even care if somebody's famous. If somebody does something neat and they make some cool accomplishment, well, I'd love to hear about how it happened and what it was like and stuff like that. I think that's natural and that's actually really fascinating stuff. Doesn't matter if you're famous. You could be just like, well, like there's a dude that my brother originally sent me a video of this guy on the street who used like a bunch of pedals, sampling and loop pedals and stuff like that. And he did, like, it was basically him and a microphone, and he would basically inject these beatboxing patterns and it would loop and stuff, and he'd modify it, and it was really, really awesome what he did. But it's like, I'd love to talk to that dude. Like the dude that, there's a guy that built these, I think they call him Pipe Guy. He used PVC pipe and built this like contraption that did like techno, and he used flip-flops, like, that'd be a cool guy to talk to.
I would love to talk to Brian Wilson. And he's in his 80s now, so like probably won't ever happen. But just the sheer level of genius behind his songwriting. People are always like, Brian, what's your favorite Beach Boys album or Beach Boys song, or like deep track or this or that? And it's like, but I don't hear a lot of talk about like, what was your writing process like? Like, how do these things come to you? Like, do you hear these melodies and harmonies like exactly as they end up being, or is there some slight modification when it comes into the real world? Because as an artist myself, and you probably experience this too, you'll have something really cool up here, and when you go to write it, it may still really be cool, but it's totally different.
It's totally different. Yeah. I very rarely have I ever had a song idea that turns out the way that I imagined it.
Right. And it's somewhat frustrating, but like you also get cool results sometimes.
And you get unexpected results that are like, wow, this is actually cooler than what I was thinking. Than the original idea, like, wow, okay, I would have never thought of this, but it's the struggle of crafting and putting all this stuff together. Yeah. And well, I mean, this is all really good stuff, but I think we should go kind of back to the idea of those who are in certain positions who are totally disconnected. And I think that's a problem. And it's that faith, basically. Like, well, for instance, let's talk about the Pope, right? If nobody cared about Catholicism, then nobody would care about the Pope. The Pope would just be a dude in like a fancy ass city in like weird clothing and performing these strange rituals all the time. And, speaking in Latin, do they even do that anymore? But like,
I think so.
Well, and every single person in similar positions, presidents or whatever, high positions, ivory tower kind of positions. Actually, the ivory tower, the Vatican is a good example of that. It is totally an ivory tower, but it's a city, which is completely cut off from the rest of the world. It's its own thing. But yeah, it's all faith. Politics too. Imagine what would be the point of a president if nobody voted? If nobody cared, nobody watched the news about anything, they just tuned it out, like whatever, you know?
Yeah. I mean, with the way society is constructed, I mean, most people don't care.
True.
Like half or less than half of the country votes, right? So so it's like it really doesn't impact everybody.
No.
Every day. Like it does impact everybody at some point.
Well, and that's where the
but
influence comes in, like that, because the president can actually, or say like a mayor of a city can actually somehow affect your life, but they only do that because of all this faith, because they have their minions that work under them that perform duties for them, and other people defer to their authority and allow them to do those things, like, oh well, I guess I have to follow the rules because you say so. And I'd like to see less of that. I'd like to see a more more of a meritocracy, essentially, where yeah, you can have those positions of authority because you've proven that you're worthy of having those positions. Yes, you're a billionaire philanthropist who changes the world. Like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll let you do those things because they're good things. Life is better because you're doing these things, solving problems, building schools or libraries or something like that for free. That's a good thing.
I kind of think, I don't know what your opinion is of the Nobel Prizes, but I feel like a system like that should be expanded and integrated into the selection process for leadership.
I agree.
Across the world, because like these are people that actually are being recognized for doing good in the world,
making a difference,
actually did good, and and earned that.
Well, and the thing is, the Nobel
Prize should
at
least be offered the opportunity to be like, would you like to affect more change and take on this challenge over here? Well, and lead this country or something.
Getting a Nobel Prize is like the highest reward. It is global recognition of doing something incredible. That is, we need more of that. I think we also need the opposite too. There should be a prize for the shittiest person. Like, you frittered away everything and did nothing. You accomplished nothing. You get a womp womp prize. That needs to be a global thing too. So people are afraid. People need to be kind of afraid of being recognized in that way.
Oh God!
Like, I don't want to get.
Let's just do that. Let's just start that.
I agree.
The kitchen sink microscopy sink trap award.
Yep. Actually, here's the thing.
Grease trap.
Yeah. Well, there's Adam Savage. Well, Mythbusters. They did the "Can you polish a turd" episode, and they found that yes, actually, they took dung, and they actually got it polished, like mirror finish. So what about if we use like a press and use dung and press out some kind of a metal out of poo and then polish that up, and then they get awarded that?
A literal polished turd for an award. Congratulations, you're famous, but you did jack shit.
You get the Shithid Award.
God, we totally got to do that. Like,
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Man,
I mean, it is like, it's kind of a base, jab at people, but it also could be a driving force for self-improvement,
absolutely.
The public mottery is something that I think most people would like to avoid. So.
Yes, you do not want to be a meme. That's Streisand effect kind of thing. Well, not exactly, but kind of in that regard. Like, things go viral in a bad way that Yeah, you want to avoid that. And I think that should be an award like that would be basically somebody who could have done something but did nothing. Like you were a billionaire, but you just bought a bunch of cars and properties and whatnot. Like at the end of the day, nothing's different. The world is unchanged because of your existence. Like that's the kind of or it's worse off, right? Like you were in this position that you could have done good, but instead you did the bad thing and ruined lives and destroyed the economy or the like the environment or something.
Yeah. What would an acceptance speech for a polished turd trophy for the kitchen sink microscopy grease trap award be?
I'm sure it would involve a lot of tears. Thank you.
I think.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. As people are throwing rotten tomatoes.
Why do I even try?
Yeah, exactly. Man.
Yeah, I mean, they say, everyone shouldn't get just like a participation trophy, but a participation trophy where like you completely dorked everything up by participating. I think I'm okay with that.
I agree. Yeah, because I think that'll keep people on their toes, right? We're like, if you didn't get that trophy, you'd be forgotten for having done nothing. But if you got it, now you're recorded permanently in the annals of time. Forever, everybody will know your name.
You remember in the 90s, the no fear shirts?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I had one no fear shirt because I thought it was pretty clever. It said, second place is first loser. Last place is last loser, which is even worse, right? You're not just last, you're the last loser.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would have to be something that you'd calculate because obviously not everybody has the means to accomplish a whole hell of a lot. Most people don't, or maybe the knowledge or whatever, or the connections to be able to do something great. But when somebody has all the balls in their court, right? Like they have the potential, the capacity to do whatever the hell they want to do, and they don't do anything. Yeah, that's where you're going to get one of those prizes.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the Ivory Tower definitions that I have on my screen here, it's like a mix of two meanings, a mockery of absent-minded savant and admiration of someone who is able to devote his or her entire efforts to a noble cause. Meaning like, yeah, it's easy to say like all we have to do is this when like you don't have to work 40 hours a day busting your ass because you have millions of dollars, like there's definitely a disconnect between reality and gee, it's so easy to get where I am. Why aren't you doing it too? Like the guy with the elbow pads at 7-Eleven.
Yep.
It's not as easy as investing money because, well, I don't have money.
Well, you could. It'd be like, somebody you tell somebody, well, you should just climb up those stairs, and they're like, well, I'm missing a leg, and you're like, well, I have 2 legs.
Right, exactly. Or the people that used to tell you like, well, if you need money so bad, why don't you just dip into your savings?
Oh yeah.
Well, that would be a great idea, but just 2 minor drawbacks.
1, I don't have any savings. 2, I don't have any savings. I dealt with that when I was unemployed, when we were roommates with collections, and they would say the same thing, like, oh, well, you could pay this if just pull something out of savings. And I'm like, what's that then? I don't have savings. I barely have a bank account. I think I have $10 in the bank, and you're asking me to pay $1,200. No, I think the first priority is shelter and water and food, and I can't even afford those things. So why would I even bother paying your stupid ass bill?
You guys have savings?
I actually finally have savings now. A little bit, tiny amount.
But I mean, that's the thing is like doing it with hard work takes a really long ass time, and you probably don't really get to a point of like maximum like gross wealth.
Yeah.
Which nobody should really want anyway because it's kind of wasted. And on the flip side, like it's not as easy as just taking a little bit of money and investing it, because a little bit of gains on a little bit of money that you could be spending for a little bit of food doesn't make any sense at all. You have to kind of start big.
Yeah.
Whether it's with gambling or investing, like you're not going to get much of anything unless you go like all in with a big amount, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if you start with like $50 investing, you might
Nothing.
come back
Nothing.
with like a couple pennies.
55 bucks after 10 years.
But if you had, say, like $50 million that you invested, well, that percentage, that's significant then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just waiting for the day I get like $1 million somehow, so I can just put it in the bank and live off the interest.
Yeah.
And then whatever else I do is on top of that, you know, like,
well, that's one of the
I
things.
can just retire, you know, like,
if I came into a bunch of money, for me, it's like, I don't need a whole lot. I mean, I'm pretty self-sufficient with what I've got. Don't really need much more. I mean, I would like a better boat. That's about it.
And then that's what separates us from the Ivory Tower, is like, we know what it's like to not have enough. And you know what? It's actually not that bad.
Well, and what I would want to do, the thing is, I'm one of these people who wants to help people. I want to lift people up. So I'd be the one to take that resource and put it towards bettering humanity in some fashion, whatever it is, whatever I have the capacity to do. I mean, I already do that with my little tiny amount of charity stuff that I do. And if I had more resources, more money, or more influence or something, hell yeah, I'd be doing that. Helping the homeless or people with mental health issues or something. People in places that suck. Somehow, I don't know what it would look like, because I don't know I haven't had that kind of resource before, but that's because, to me, that's what gives me happiness and joy, is that sense of like, oh wow, the world is a better place because of what I did. That's awesome. That's a good feeling. Somebody will remember my name now, and for good things.
No, it's definitely awesome to make a positive impact in the life of just even one person, you know. Like if you can say you've done that, like, you've lived a worthwhile life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
and it doesn't take money to do that. That's one of the things I love, teaching people how to do things for themselves, whatever it is. Like, we were talking about 3D printing earlier. It's like, yeah, you come to me asking about 3D printing, I will give you all the information that I have. I think that's awesome. Learning how to program a computer, how to fix things, how to build things, like, those are valuable skills that are life-changing. How to budget, even. I always, every time I encounter people, I try to teach them something that I've learned. And, guru, but I've learned a few things because I've failed a hell of a lot and learned things from that. And I want to share those experiences, just basically share that knowledge with other people to lift everybody up.
That reminds me, I've been wanting to do this for a while, because I have such a huge level of gratitude for what this guy did for me. There's a place here in Germany where it's in the middle of fucking nowhere, like, but people come from all over Germany, even neighboring countries, to go to this one guy who has all this like super cool equipment and everything. And you're there for like maybe 10 minutes, and they like scan your feet and stuff. And then you come back a week or two later and you get these like custom made shoe insoles. Right. And I was like I've got like dead bone and like cartilage degradation and stuff like that in my knees. And of course I've got like all this dead nerve neuropathy pain and stuff from cancer. And that's kind of what I was aiming to fix, was the neuropathy. And so I go to this guy and get these new insoles, and, like, kind of hurt for the first day or two. And then I get used to them. And before I know it, like a couple weeks later, the knee pain is gone. The back pain is almost alleviated, from fucking shoe inserts.
Yeah.
And furthermore, this guy like walks with a crazy limp, like whatever he's got going on wasn't fixed by this, but he still has this passion to like help others, does it super well. And so I want to do like a YouTube short, like just kind of like giving him a shout out, a little like,
Yeah.
recommendation.
Oh yeah, people who do stuff like that. I mean, even if they charge money, I believe in open source, obviously, as everybody knows. But you got to live, so you're going to need something. So like donations are important, and there are organizations that are kind of like that, like St. Jude's. Every single time I get a chance to donate to St. Jude's, I do whatever I can spare because it's great. It helps kids, particularly kids with cancer, but a family can come in with their kid who has cancer and they will do their best to treat that kid for free, no strings attached. And that is awesome. That's an awesome thing. We need more organizations.
Seattle Cancer Care Alliance was not so gracious.
Well, you have to go with the woke angle and say, well, I identify as a 9-year-old boy. And what are they going to do? Well, I guess back then that wouldn't have flown, but now maybe.
Yeah, it's like I definitely, I was too hard on them at the time. I feel like, I opted out of all the follow-up research and everything that helped other people just out of spite, which I kind of regret now being in the research field.
The information is super important for progress.
I can probably actually go back and give consent, but there's 16 years of gap now. So, but like it wasn't completely unjustified anger because there was, and I mean, some of it was within their control and some of it was not, but like what recently happened with the CEO of United Healthcare getting shot and killed. It's like, this is real life and death stuff, and money should not get in the way of that. So an organization like St. Jude's is doing the right thing. They're a little pocket of humanity in a country that's built off of capitalism, and not commerce, but capitalism. Like,
well, and there's corporatocratic elements too. That's because you have interaction with the government and stuff, and all these rules and regulations, basically designed to make it more difficult for competition to come in. More hoops to jump.
Oh, there's plenty of competition in the private health insurance sector. It's just it's not so flexible that anyone can just kind of like jump ship, because it's often given to you through, well, not given, but like shared in cost through your employer, probably 99% of the cases. And if you have a problem with your insurance, you can't change them, with the exception of at great personal cost of like paying 100% of the premiums to go somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not feasible. So it's not an option, like you might as well not consider that an option, because most people can't do that. That's a privilege that only the super rich could do. And then they in their ivory tower are like, well, why don't you just pull it out of savings and go buy Molina Healthcare or something, like, well, fuck you, asshole.
Yeah.
If it were that easy, of course I would do that. But,
yeah.
Like, the thought didn't occur to me that maybe I should go somewhere else, but I can't. I'm kind of like in these handcuffs.
Well, and I think
I understand the frustration.
I think corporations do kind of create this kind of ivory tower effect, like mini ivory towers within the organization, where the executives at the top are completely disconnected from the boots on the ground people, whoever, like all the minimum wage employees or the managers or whatever. They're just looking. They just look at numbers all day long, and the numbers need to be a certain way. Very rarely do they actually engage with their everyday employees, and I think that's detrimental. And you can see,
of course, it is.
You can see how doing the opposite works very well, like the Toyota method. That I mean, they still have a hierarchical structure, but everybody puts in a little tiny bit, and they analyze things, and they take in input from the factory workers and who, you know, all kinds of people to try to improve things. And well, that's why Toyota is pretty much the only car that you should be buying these days.
I get this sickening feeling from like working at a place that's like a publicly traded company. And they have this plaque on their wall that says, "Our mission is to do blah, 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 blah." Like all these like humanitarian things that sound really good.
Mm.
But the unwritten rule, numero uno, is we're beholden to the shareholders.
Yeah.
And at no cost, we will make sure they make money. You know, so it's like,
well, and that's where it's a corporatocratic system, because
Yeah.
like that's the government being involved in business. Which,
well, that's investors. Like if the
Yeah, but
government weren't there, the investors would
the
be like, you know what,
construct-
if I'm pulling my money out if you don't give me profit.
No, but
You
the
know,
legal
like, it has
construct-
nothing to do with it.
no, the legal construct of a corporation is a government thing and not
I
a
understand
societal
that,
thing.
but like the whole like the infrastructure of it may have been put there by the government, but like if the government took that away, it wouldn't go away. People would still do it. People would be like, we need investors, and as a reward for investing in our company, we guarantee you will make more money. You know,
Well, and
of course they would still do that. You know,
They're investors. You always kind of need that unless you already are coming in with a bunch of resources in your pocket. But like venture capital, that's very different than say like a publicly traded company that's selling shares or something. The shareholders, that's
it's like you said, a meritocracy. Like if you have a bunch of money and you can invest in these good ideas and you know, beneficial projects, you know, you could tout that as like your merit rather than being like, look at me, I've got almost $1 trillion. You could be like, look at this, I cured cancer by providing a bunch of money to this particular research or something, you know, like,
or maybe you do that research yourself. Like that's what your company
Yeah.
does. Well, and they're not, the two are not mutually exclusive. You can do good in the world and still make money. Like it's
Mhm.
not one or the other. It's just a matter of what you put your resources into. And sometimes doing good in the world is building a better mousetrap. I don't know, selling a roll of toilet paper that Eric doesn't have to 3D print a spacer because it's so narrow. Or maybe, you know, it's better toilet paper or something. I don't know. Whatever. It could be anything. A better soap or something, like cleaners and stuff. Maybe you do something for the environment or come up with a way to do something that used to be dangerous and now it's safe. Those are good things. And you can make money. It's totally possible. But that's the thing. It's like, I think, see, you have companies that are founded by a visionary and they're like, I want to make a difference. I want to do this amazing thing. And they end up accomplishing it and make a ton of money. And then the company balloons in size. And pretty soon there's like thousands of people working there and it gets disconnected. I mean, Boeing is a good example of that, where like the executives at Boeing obviously do not know what is happening behind the scenes. Like, oh, planes fucking falling apart in flight.
That might be a deep-seated root cause. Like, because speaking of Boeing, I was gonna say, like, I worked for a self-made man, you know, like a guy in Tacoma that started a business making plastic parts for aerospace, pretty much like worked hand in hand with Boeing. That was like the big customer. While I worked there, it was happened to be the time he was like stepping down and passing the torch to somebody else. So my father-in-law had worked there. And my father-in-law at the time had worked there, and he was like, you should totally come work here. You know, it's part of, he really cared about us, and there was no union for plastic workers. So he did some talking and got us in on this like steel workers union. So we're part of a union. And like, how cool is that? You know, like the one plastic company in a steel worker union. And he was like, dude, like twice a year we get these big fat bonuses from the profit. Like he has enough money, he doesn't want any more. He gives it to the people that do good work for him. And he would go buy like a brand new motorcycle, you know, with his bonus check, you know, like that kind of money. And you know, there was like overtime and stuff and super good benefits. And I went to work there, and it was right as they were kind of changing how things went. So I still had some of the benefits. I never really saw that bonus, mainly because I got cancer again, and had to go on disability. But when I did, like they had this soda machine fund. So like they had a couple soda machines on site, but instead of like taking their cut of the profit from having them on their property, they put it into a pool for anyone who had like medical need. And on top of all that, they had world renowned, the best private health insurance there ever was. I had no copay, nothing came out of my paycheck, like no co-insurance, nothing. I paid nothing, and got things covered.
Wow.
And with that, even with that insurance, I still had $250,000 of cancer debt, but that's not their fault.
No, exactly. I mean, they're doing a lot more than most companies would do.
But the point I'm getting at is like years later, I find out all those bonuses went away. Like there were no more bonuses after I was laid off and stuff, and the torch had long been passed. You know, the guy who had the vision, the guy who cared about the people that did hard work for him, his dream was fucking tarnished. And General Plastics, by the way, I'm just gonna fucking name them. Like it's a tarnished legacy, you know.
And that's kind of what we were talking about this whole time. That you know, when you start from the ground level and work your way up, you have a connection with the earth.
Yep.
But then if somebody comes in at the top level, right, and takes over, well, they don't have that connection anymore. And you know, I know a solution for this. Because, well, so where I work, the CEO our new CEO, well, new, I say that, she's been around for a while, but she took over from the old CEO just as a CEO coming from another company, working at another company in an executive position, and became CEO of the company that I work for. Fortunately, she's actually really cool, but she could have not been cool, you know. But what if, in order to be a CEO or a head of a company, you have to come in at an entry level position and work? Say, like, you want to be CEO of McDonald's? Okay, well, you got to start flipping burgers, frying the fries and stuff like that. Work as a cashier, fucking swab the decks in the bathroom and stuff like that.
Even just 2 weeks, you know, 2 weeks at each level or something. Like that would be good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would. I mean, if I ran a company, that's what I would want. I would want people who have experience within the company to be in charge of stuff. I wouldn't want to hire, if I say I was a franchise owner for a McDonald's, I wouldn't want to hire a manager who was a manager at like a Walmart. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I would want to hire somebody who has shown and demonstrated capacity for hard work, good organization and stuff within the place that I run.
Right.
Somebody who's familiar with that place. And then
that's important.
As you go higher up, if you want a regional manager for like McDonald's, you'd want somebody who, I don't know, maybe was a manager at a McDonald's, not somebody coming in from the outside.
Yeah.
And in order to be a manager at a McDonald's, you would have to have been a burger flipper and a bathroom scrubber. So you have that connection with the earth, with the bottom level, because that's so important.
That's not even like, you never see that ever. No. Like on LinkedIn, I see all these places I used to work. The fucking turnover rate of CEOs is astounding. And it's all like, we're so happy to have this CEO who came from like Hyundai, and he's here in biotech now to tell us what to do with, you know, molecular biology. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, like for my company, I work for a nonprofit and the current CEO came from Microsoft. How is that related? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Nothing alike.
Yeah. I'd rather, okay, fine. I mean, I guess if we're desperate for a CEO, maybe hire one that worked for another nonprofit. So at least they're kind of in the zone, I guess.
Right?
But somebody that worked for Microsoft is distinctly a for-profit company. So yeah, it's weird.
Well, I mean, they're probably somewhere in some of your stores use Microsoft products, so
Yeah.
can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, yeah,
I don't see what the problem is here.
I got a cousin that works at Microsoft, so they know how to solve everything computer related. Geez, that bugs me. Like, you could be a janitor at Microsoft and like people come to you like, well, wait a minute, my computer is acting weird. What do I do? That goes back to this whole authority thing. Like, oh
I'm
yeah,
just a red badge at Microsoft.
yeah. Mhm. But like, yeah, I don't get it. And maybe this is why companies do so poorly in general, is because of outside hiring and because the people that are kind of like leading the charge, so to speak, came from somewhere else and didn't come from the beginning. They're not boots on the ground experienced.
At no point in a company should there be a disconnect between the levels. So like a CEO should have been somebody that worked in some level of that company at some point.
Lower levels.
So, yeah, so that when they're then leading the company, they still have a rapport, like a personal rapport with the people that they're directing.
Well, and a knowledge of what the company even does.
Right. Yeah. So like when a total new person comes in, it's like, of course, they have the fresh new ideas of how things should be done with absolutely no experience in how to do them at this particular place,
but
with this team, you know, like.
But they're the CEO, so everybody is expected to defer to their authority,
right?
Even if they don't know fuck all what they're doing. Like, no, see, that's stupid. Oh, man.
There's some good diatribes in this one.
Well, and because that's the thing, it's like we illuminate problems and discuss them and then propose solutions. And this is my solution proposal. Yeah. Like, say somebody wants to be president of the US. Let's go all the way. Let's go big. Well, okay. The US is full of a variety of people with all kinds of experiences and different socioeconomic statuses. If I would be accepting of a president if they had been homeless for a while, like living in a car or in a tent, maybe had an addiction problem, maybe been in jail for a while, worked a minimum wage job for a few years, like was a single parent or something. These kinds of things that people struggle, real people, a lot of people in this country struggle with. Well, countries all over the world. I mean, that it's not unique to the US. But in order to be an effective leader, you have to be in touch with everybody. And the best way to do that is to have experienced those things yourself personally. And we don't have that, though. It's a popularity contest when it comes to politics. Like, oh yeah, you just had a bunch of flashy ads and you were popular on social media and everybody checked the checkbox. Enough people checked the checkbox that, well, I guess you won. Like, well, what the hell is that? That doesn't mean that you're qualified to actually be the head of this country. The same thing with a CEO. Just simply being voted in doesn't mean you're qualified to be the head of a company. You know, like, sure, you may have served as a CEO over there, but this is a whole different animal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would, you should rise up the ranks to achieve that position, to even be considered for that position.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, like, of all the positions in a company, the one that should always be hired from within is the CEO.
Yeah.
But it pretty much never is.
Never. That is so rare.
Yeah.
Like almost impossible for that to happen.
Like, why? Why?
It makes no sense. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Okay, well, what about like a hiring for a CEO position from one of the executives that work under the CEO. No, they didn't do that at my company. No, they canned the CEO and then just hired a CEO from a totally different company. Like what? I mean, yeah, okay, maybe you're skilled in being a CEO. Actually, fortunately, she turned out to be okay, but like I said, it could have gone the other way entirely. And but that would go a long way to fixing these things, getting rid of the ivory tower sort of thing. Because people in politics, say, let's take the US, for example. Most politicians have been politicians for most of their lives. Like the Senate and Congress people, the House and whatnot. Presidents are typically, well, with a few exceptions, typically they've been politicians for most of their lives. Like what? How does that? And they're like, oh, I feel your pain. Like, fuck if you do, bitch. You don't know anything. You have never worked. You've never lived with nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like when we were running a business, I think we were paying ourselves like $35 a week or something. Maybe less than that. Like
no, it was like $700 a month or something.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, it wasn't that much.
Yeah.
Geez, back in 2003 too, like I didn't have any income. I didn't have any money in the bank. It's like, well, what are you going to do? But like, at least somebody should have experienced that, like a little bit of poverty, because they always, all these, like, well, let's talk politicians in this regard, because they all say, well, I'm going to fix poverty or, whatever. It's like, have you been poor? No. Well, shut the fuck up. Get the fuck out of my face, because you don't know poverty.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather have a president who was homeless, because at least they know what it's like. And same thing with like people of wealth. Like if you came from nothing or started with very little and worked your way up, I can respect that. But I don't, it's like, handing off that wealth to somebody is the same thing as handing off the position of CEO to somebody who's only been a CEO their whole career, or been a politician their whole career. Like, yeah, they're going to be disconnected. And yet they're the ones tasked with presumably solving these problems that they claim to want to solve. How? They don't know. They have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Yeah, man. I'm getting fired up now.
Oh yeah. Well, we've definitely covered quite a bit of the ivory tower.
Yeah.
Whether it's politicians or CEOs or
religious figures,
religious, sports, movie figures, like whatever. It really all does come down to what you've proven that you can do or what you know.
Yeah.
And money has like nothing to do with it.
No, money's a tool. That's all it is.
It's
just a tool.
Of what you do with the money, Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, me, I have all the tools, but I don't just sit on the tools and keep them to myself. It's like, hey, if somebody needs help with something, I have all these tools to help people solve their problems without spending a bunch of money. And maybe they'll learn something along the way, so that in the future, instead of having to come to me, they'll know how to do it now and know what tools to buy, because I've fucked up so many times that I've learned the right tools and the wrong tools. And I think it's a mindset kind of thing. Sure, we could be Ferengi and be hyper focused on acquisition, but acquisitions for its own sake is pointless. Okay, yeah, you piled up a bunch of stuff there. So like what's the point? It's got to be doing something. And that's the thing. It's like, if you have a bunch of money, that money ought to be doing something. And if it's doing something, it should be doing something that does something good.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what's the point of being alive? What? Oh yeah, you look at all these people that have these big expensive houses and a bunch of cars and hookers and blow and whatnot, and it's like, okay, yeah, I guess you got that. I mean, if I had that money, I could do the same. That's nothing. That's not an accomplishment. That's just shit that a person could do. It's like, yeah, there's a button here, and if I push the button, this thing happens. And so you push the button and that thing happens. Well, that's easy. That's an easy thing. If I had that button in front of me, I could push it too, and the thing would happen. What's remarkable is when you do something that seems to be impossible or tackle a challenge or something like that. That's impressive, and that's worthy of respect.
Right.
Pushing the stupid button is not worthy of respect, and we should not respect people who that's their only accomplishment in life.
Congratulations, you have a penis. You don't need to whip it out and show it.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, if you have a bunch of money, you won't get arrested for it. Well, they might arrest you, but you're going to get off.
Right.
Whereas if you're poor... See what I did there?
Conceal in time. Unless you stick your finger inside to commit the crime. Unless associate is provide. You get blood is what's lying. Cry for the judge and swallow that pride. Send you the bill. What you see how that feels. All concept